when I saw him walk into my garden on the day of my daughter's wedding, holding her hand and smiling that same crooked smile I hadn't seen in over 30 years, I felt the earth disappear beneath me. Because the man she was marrying, the man she loved, was the first boy I ever truly loved, and the only one who ever truly broke me. I need to tell this story. I've been holding it inside for almost a year now, and it's tearing me apart. Every night I go to bed with a tightness in my chest. Every morning I wake up pretending to be someone I'm not, pretending to be okay, pretending to be the supportive mother, the composed professional, the woman who's proud of her daughter's new life. But the truth is so much uglier and so much harder to admit. My name is Diane. I'm 50 years old. I've lived in New Haven, Connecticut for most of my life. I'm a pediatrician. I've always liked helping children, always liked structure, reason, purpose. I've been a widow for 5 years. My husband, Mark, passed away from pancreatic cancer. He was a kind man, steady, loving in his way. We weren't passionate, not like in the movies, but we respected each other, built a home together, raised a daughter. We had a good life, a quiet one, predictable. And then Jason came back. God, even just saying his name now makes my stomach twist. You never really forget your first love. People say that all the time, and you nod politely. Like, yes, teenage romance, what a cliche. But they don't know. They don't know what it's like when that love burned through you like a fire you didn't know how to put out. When it shaped you before you even understood what being a woman meant. When it ended without warning, without closure, leaving a scar you convinced yourself had faded, until one look reignited everything. I was 17 when I met him. Senior year of high school. He was the new kid, transferred mid-semester from Chicago, mysterious and magnetic in a way boys back then just weren't. He had this wild, unpolished charm, dark hair that curled at the edges, a chipped tooth he never fixed, a leather jacket he wore no matter the weather. He didn't care about grades. He barely showed up to class. But when he did, he'd sit in the back of the room, sketching in a worn notebook. Always watching, never trying too hard. I was the opposite. Top of my class, National Honor Society, mathlete. The kind of girl who color-coded her binders and thought her future depended on which Ivy League accepted her. I wasn't the type boys like him noticed. But he noticed me. One afternoon after school, I found a note in my locker. No name, just a question, written in pencil. Do you ever wish you could just run away? I didn't know who it was from. I didn't tell anyone, but I answered. Every single day, and I slipped the note back through the slats. The next day, there was another. Then, let's run. That was how it started, through notes, glances, chance meetings at the diner, late-night drives with the windows down and music too loud. He made me feel reckless, alive. I snuck out for the first time in my life to lie in the grass with him behind the football field, watching stars and talking about dreams we barely understood. He was my first kiss, my first time. The first person who made me feel like I wasn't just a girl with perfect grades and no life. We were together for 6 months. I was head over heels, the kind of obsessed only a teenage girl can be. I imagined running away with him, just like we wrote in those first notes. I imagined what our kids would look like. I imagined forever. And then he disappeared, just like that. He didn't show up to school one Friday. I thought maybe he was sick. Then Monday came, and he still wasn't there. I called, no answer. I drove past his house, empty, for sale sign out front. It was like he'd been erased. No goodbye, no letter, no explanation. I was 17 and shattered. I couldn't eat. I cried every night for a month. My mother told me to pull myself together. My friends told me it was puppy love, not real. But it was real to me. He was real. Eventually, I stopped talking about it, buried it deep, told myself that love was a myth, or at least a mistake. I got into Yale. I went to medical school. I met Mark. Kind, stable, predictable Mark. He was nothing like Jason, which felt like a blessing. He was the opposite of chaos. I didn't think about Jason again until my daughter brought him home. It started innocently. "Mom," she said one evening, calling from her apartment, "I want you to meet someone. He's special." And I think this could be serious. Her name is Lily. 24, smart, driven, with this electric energy that fills a room. She graduated from Brown and went straight into finance. Fearless, confident, nothing like me at her age. I adore her. She's my only child, my miracle. I was happy for her. She'd been in bad relationships before. Boys who didn't respect her, who made her feel small. I wanted her to find someone good, someone stable. "He's older," she warned, "but not like old. Just mature." I laughed. "How old?" 47. That gave me pause. That was a lot older. But I kept my voice neutral. "Well, bring him by. I'd love to meet him." The night she brought him over, I was distracted, setting the table, lighting candles, checking the roast. I remember wiping my hands on a dish towel as I heard the knock on the door, and then I opened it, and the world stopped. Jason, 33 years later. Older, yes, but unmistakable. The same eyes, the same crooked grin. The same dimple in his left cheek. His hair was shorter now, peppered with gray. He wore a dark blazer over jeans, and he held Lily's hand like it was the most natural thing in the world. I froze. He didn't. "Hi," he said, smiling. "You must be Diane." His voice was deeper, rougher, but still him. For a moment, I thought I might faint. I must have paused too long, because Lily nudged me. "Mom?" I cleared my throat, forced a smile. Yes, I'm sorry. Come in." Jason extended his hand. I shook it. His grip was warm, firm, too familiar. Our eyes met. He knew. Of course he knew. He knew exactly who I was, and he was pretending he didn't. I didn't sleep that night. After they left, I wandered around the house in silence, my fingertips grazing the back of the couch, the kitchen counter, the edge of the photo frame on the hallway wall. Everything around me felt suddenly unfamiliar, as if I were a guest in my own home. The air was too still, the shadows too loud. It felt like time had folded in on itself, and the past had slipped into the room without knocking. I thought I had buried him. That boy, that fire, that ache, that piece of my youth that had once meant everything and had vanished without a goodbye. For over 30 years, I had convinced myself it was just teenage nonsense, that what we had couldn't have possibly been real. I'd married, raised a daughter, built a career, and told myself that love, real love, was quieter, steadier, simpler. And then Jason reappeared. Only now he wasn't mine. He was hers, my daughter's, and I couldn't ignore what I saw in his eyes. For days after that dinner, I tried to pretend it hadn't happened. I went to work. I returned calls. I responded to emails. But beneath the surface of every polite interaction and routine chore, something had been shaken loose. I was walking around with a heart that didn't feel like it belonged to me anymore, like it had been rewired, jump-started, after decades of silence. I thought maybe it was just shock. Maybe seeing him again had stirred something old, and it would settle back down. That's what I hoped. But it didn't. The memories came back first, not in a wave, but in steady, unrelenting trickles. Little things. The smell of his cologne back then, cheap and spicy. The way his fingers brushed mine when he passed me a pen in chemistry class. The laughter echoing in the woods behind the school as we lay tangled in each other beneath a blanket of stars. The promises we made in whispers, breathless, like we were the only two people in the universe. I remembered his hands, the way they moved over me, the way they made me feel like my body was something sacred. It wasn't just nostalgia. It was a waking, a dangerous, potent kind of remembering. 2 weeks later, Lily invited me to brunch. She said she wanted to talk through some ideas for the wedding. Flower arrangements, seating plans, that sort of thing. She picked a charming little cafe in the center of town, one of those places with exposed brick and mismatched chairs and chalkboard menus with avocado toast options. I arrived a little early, dressed more carefully than I usually did for a casual Saturday. I wore mascara, though I hadn't meant to. My hands were trembling slightly when I reached for the menu, as if my body already knew what I refused to admit to myself. Lily was glowing. She always was when she was in love. She spoke quickly, animatedly, going on about color palettes and outdoor lighting. I smiled and nodded, trying to listen, but I was distracted by the knowledge that Jason might join us. She'd mentioned he was nearby. He might swing by, she said. No pressure. No pressure. The bell above the cafe door jingled midway through my first cappuccino, and I didn't need to look up to know it was him. I felt it, that shift in the air, that soft, pulling sensation behind my ribcage. And then he was beside us. Blue shirt, sleeves rolled up, no tie. The collar open just enough to see the edge of his collarbone. His hair looked slightly damp, like he'd showered quickly and hadn't bothered to dry it fully. I caught the faint scent of something familiar, not exactly the same as back then, but close enough to make my throat tighten. He leaned down and kissed Lily on the cheek, my daughter, and I sat there smiling as if everything was fine. He slid into the seat across from me, directly in my line of sight. His presence filled the space so effortlessly. He told some story about a zoning dispute on a project he was working on, and Lily laughed in that high, happy way of hers. I pretended to listen, my gaze fixed on my coffee, but I felt his eyes on me. When I looked up, we locked eyes. Only for a second, but that second was electric. It said everything we weren't saying aloud, that we remembered, that this was not just coincidence, that the thing between us, once so powerful, so real, had not died. It had only gone dormant, and now it was waking up. He said nothing. I said nothing. But when Lily looked away to check a message on her phone, he looked at me again. That same lingering look he used to give me in class, when our friends were around, and we had to pretend we weren't sneaking off to meet behind the science building. After brunch, we stepped outside into a light drizzle. Lily was busy hailing a rideshare, already late for a fitting. Jason lingered. I stood beneath the cafe awning, trying to will my body into calm. And then he came closer. Not close enough to touch, but close enough that I could smell the rain on his skin. He didn't say my name. He didn't ask how I'd been. He just stood there, quiet, his jaw tight, like he was trying to hold back an entire ocean. I didn't think I'd ever see you again, he said softly. His voice was deeper now, roughened with time. But it still held that undertone, that low, intimate warmth that used to make my knees go weak. I turned to face him, and for a second, I forgot how to breathe. You didn't recognize me, I said, not quite accusingly, more like a question, a wound. I did, he answered, the second you opened the door. But what was I supposed to do? I didn't answer. I couldn't. The truth was, I didn't know either. He looked down at his shoes, then back at me. I didn't leave you by choice, Diane. I know that probably doesn't matter now, but I need you to know. A lump formed in my throat. I nodded, just barely. I wrote to you. 6 letters, he said. I mailed them to your house. I waited for months to hear back. I felt a strange hot ache behind my eyes. I never got them. He exhaled sharply. I figured. Your mom always hated me. She did. Fiercely, I suddenly imagined her standing by the mailbox, tearing those envelopes in half without even opening them, and something inside me cracked all over again, not with anger, but with grief. I had spent decades believing he didn't care, that I was just a temporary distraction, a mistake, but it had never been true. Jason took half a step closer. I've never stopped thinking about you, he said. And before I could respond, before I could even decide how I felt, Lily called out from the curb, waving him over. And just like that, the moment broke. He gave me one last look, eyes full of everything we couldn't say, and walked away. I stood in the rain, shivering, my heart pounding like I was 17 again. But I wasn't 17. I was a grown woman, watching the man who once promised me forever climb into a car with my daughter, and I had no idea how I was supposed to live with that. After that morning outside the cafe, I told myself I wouldn't see him again unless Lily was present. I told myself it was just closure, that hearing him say those words, that he didn't leave by choice, that he had written, was enough. That I could tuck those old memories back where they belonged and go back to being the mother of the bride. But memory is not a drawer you can close once something inside it wakes up. In the days that followed, I began to notice small changes in myself. I would glance at my phone more often, wondering if she had messaged, half hoping she might mention him. I began choosing clothes more deliberately. Lipstick I hadn't worn in years, silk blouses instead of sweaters. I found myself staring at old photos of me in my 20s, trying to reconcile who I had become with who I once was. And all the while, I told myself it meant nothing. Then came the Saturday that broke that lie apart. Lily had a bachelorette spa weekend planned with her friends in Vermont, a retreat full of yoga and matcha and facials. She was so excited when she told me, arms full of tote bags and a half-zipped suitcase on the floor. Jason's going to stop by and pick up the sample flower arrangements tomorrow, she said casually. I asked them to deliver them here. Would you mind handing them off to him? I hesitated, just a beat too long. Of course, I said, managing a smile. She hugged me tightly, kissed my cheek, and was out the door 10 minutes later. I remember standing in the hallway, her perfume still in the air, staring at the silence she left behind. The next day, it rained, a steady, quiet drizzle that soaked the garden and streaked the windows. I spent most of the morning trying to distract myself, organizing paperwork, baking a batch of cookies I didn't even want to eat, wiping already clean countertops. At 2:47 p.m., the doorbell rang. I almost didn't answer it, but I did. He stood there in a gray sweater, damp around the shoulders, a box under one arm. His hair was tousled from the wind, and he looked at me with a guarded kind of hesitation, like he wasn't sure if he should be there either. The samples, he said, lifting the box slightly. I nodded and stepped aside to let him in. The air between us was thick, not quite awkward, but charged. We both pretended to be casual. He set the box down on the kitchen table, pulled back the tissue paper, and gestured toward the arrangements. They said 2 styles, he said. This one's peonies and ranunculus, the other's more of a wildflower look. I leaned in. The scent of the flowers was fresh and sweet. His hand brushed mine as I reached to adjust a stem, and the contact sent a current straight through my body. I tried to ignore it. I told myself I was imagining things. But when I looked up, he was already looking at me. He didn't look away. We stood like that for a long, fragile second, too long. Then he exhaled and stepped back, running a hand through his hair. This is insane, he muttered under his breath. I swallowed hard, trying to steady my voice. You shouldn't have come alone. She asked me to, he replied. I didn't plan this. I know. Silence settled again, heavier now. I thought maybe I could handle this, he said finally. Pretend it doesn't matter. Pretend we're just 2 people who used to know each other a long time ago. And his eyes lifted to mine. It still matters. That did something to me, cracked something that had been barely holding together. I turned away under the pretense of checking the arrangement again, but really just to catch my breath. He didn't move. I could feel his presence behind me, the weight of it, the heat of his body not even touching me, yet somehow making my skin prickle. I dreamed about you last night, he said quietly. I froze. He stepped closer. I could feel the whisper of his breath against my hair. I shouldn't tell you that, he continued, but I need you to know. I didn't forget. Not once. Not in all these years. I should have told him to leave. I should have reminded him that this wasn't about us anymore. But I didn't. Instead, I turned toward him, slowly, and something in my expression must have betrayed me. The way my eyes searched his face, the way my lips parted, but no words came out. His hand reached up, tentatively, like he was giving me time to stop him. He brushed a strand of hair away from my cheek, his fingers grazing my skin. I inhaled sharply. He stepped even closer. Our bodies were barely touching, but it felt like fire between us. I could hear the rain outside, the ticking of the clock in the hallway, the sound of my own breathing growing faster. But he didn't kiss me. He didn't cross that line. Not yet. Instead, he dropped his hand and stepped back, as if it took every ounce of his willpower. "I should go," he said, voice hoarse. I nodded, though I couldn't speak. He picked up the box, gave me one last look, one that said everything he wasn't allowed to, and walked to the door. I closed it behind him and leaned against it, shaking. My heart was pounding, my hands cold. I stood there for what felt like an hour, replaying every second of that moment in the kitchen, every glance, every breath. I wanted to scream. I wanted to cry. I wanted to run after him and pull him back in. But instead, I stayed frozen because I knew something had shifted. We hadn't touched in any way the world would call inappropriate, but I had already betrayed my daughter, and I didn't know how to stop. After Jason left that afternoon, I didn't move from the door for a long time. My back pressed against the wood, palms flat beside me, chest rising and falling with slow, measured breaths that did nothing to calm the chaos inside. My skin still tingled where he had touched me, just a fingertip against my cheek, a whisper of contact, but it had lit a fuse I could no longer pretend wasn't burning. It was the kind of touch that lingered long after the body was gone. The kind that changed things, not through the act itself, but through what it made possible. And now, the possibility of him, of us, had taken root again inside me. I tried, in the hours that followed, to return to something resembling normal. I busied myself with laundry, with organizing receipts, with wiping down the already spotless windows, but nothing felt real. The colors of the house looked too sharp, the silence too loud. I caught my reflection in the mirror and barely recognized the woman staring back, flushed, electric, frightened by her own hunger. That night, I dreamt of him again. Not the way he was now, but as he had been then. 17, golden-skinned, lying shirtless in the summer grass, staring up at the sky with that lopsided grin of his, telling me he wanted to build a world with just the two of us in it. But this time in the dream, I didn't wake up before he left. This time, I watched him walk away, and I didn't stop him. I woke up with tears in my eyes. The days after that blurred into each other, heavy with questions I didn't know how to answer. I told myself that it was just emotion, old scars reopened, that's all. It wasn't real, not anymore. That man was married, or nearly so, to my daughter, and I had a duty to protect her, not just from the world, but from me. And yet every time my phone buzzed, I hoped it was him. He didn't call, he didn't text, but I felt him, everywhere. At night, when the house went still, I would lie in bed and remember the heat of his breath behind me in the kitchen, the weight of his gaze, the restraint in his voice, and I'd ache with something raw and unfinished. The shame came in waves. What kind of mother lets herself feel this way? What kind of woman risks everything she's built, her family, her dignity, her sanity, for a man who doesn't even belong to her? But it didn't matter what I told myself. Desire doesn't care about reason. One afternoon, about a week after that moment in the kitchen, Lily called. She was flustered, rushing out the door for a meeting. "Jason's going to swing by again," she said. "There's a box of table runners in the garage that the planner wants to match with the place settings. Can you help him grab it?" I hesitated, barely breathing. "Sure," I said. "I'm home." She thanked me and hung up. I stood still for a long time after that, phone still in hand. I told myself I could handle it, that I would be civil, that nothing would happen. But I knew, deep down, that this was no longer about whether something would happen. It was about when. When he arrived, I heard his car door shut before he even rang the bell. I opened the door before he could knock. He stood there, a little breathless, wearing a fitted black t-shirt and jeans. His hair was tousled like he'd just run his hand through it a few times. There was something different in his eyes. Less hesitation, more awareness. We both knew exactly what this was now. There was no space left for denial. "The garage?" he asked softly. I nodded and led the way through the hallway, trying not to let my shoulders touch the frame of the doorway as I passed through. I could feel the heat of him behind me, the way he used to walk just close enough to let me feel the pull of his body. In the garage, the air was cooler, filled with the faint scent of cardboard and old paint. I pointed to the corner where the box sat, slightly too high for me to reach easily. He stepped past me, lifted the box effortlessly, then set it down on the work table without a word. I turned to thank him, but when I met his eyes, something inside me faltered. He was staring at me, not with lust, not with pity, but with something that made my knees go soft. Longing. And that was what undid me. Because I knew that look. It was the same one he used to give me when we lay side by side in his truck bed, watching the stars flicker above the trees. It was the look of someone who had never let go. I reached for the edge of the table to steady myself. His hand came to rest on top of mine. The contact was immediate, electric. He didn't say anything. He didn't move closer. He didn't need to. We just stood there, hands touching, eyes locked, as everything around us faded. My breath hitched. "I think about you every night," he whispered, "and I hate myself for it." I wanted to speak, to say that I did too, that I hated myself even more, but the words caught in my throat. Instead, I closed my eyes, and in that second, that long suspended second, I felt the weight of 30 years pressing down on me. All the moments we never had, all the goodbyes we never said, all the kisses that had lived only in memory, and still, I didn't pull away. His thumb moved, just slightly, brushing across my knuckles, the smallest motion, and yet it felt like crossing a continent. I opened my eyes and he was still watching me, breathing slowly, waiting. But he didn't go further, and maybe that's what hurt most of all, because part of me wanted him to. He let go first. He picked up the box and stepped back. "I should go," he said again, and I let him. But this time, as the door closed behind him, I didn't collapse against it. I walked back into the house, every nerve in my body alive and aching, because now I knew the truth. We weren't going to stop this. You were just waiting for the moment we wouldn't be able to. There's a kind of madness that sets in slowly, like a fever you don't notice until you're soaked in sweat and shaking. That's what it felt like, those next few days after Jason's hand lingered on mine in the garage, as though I'd stepped into a fog that thickened with every breath I took. The kind of fog that changes your sense of direction, makes up feel like down, makes danger look like invitation. I moved through my routines like someone pretending to be herself. I smiled when Lily called to tell me she'd chosen the wildflower arrangements. I responded to patient messages, went grocery shopping, even hosted a small book club evening where we pretended to care about the memoir someone picked. But underneath the surface of all that normalcy, something uncoiled and spread through me, a heat, a hunger, a knowing that something inside me had already snapped, and there was no going back. It wasn't just physical, though God knows that was part of it. It was mental, emotional, psychological. My memories of Jason were no longer confined to high school notebooks and dusty photographs. He had become real again, solid, present, and the worst part was that he was still him. Not a shell, not a version of someone I used to love, but the same man, only older, deeper, more controlled, and infinitely more dangerous to the woman I had become. The turning point came late one evening, nearly 2 weeks after the moment in the garage. Lily was out with friends, wedding dress fittings, followed by cocktails and dancing. I'd spoken to her earlier that day and told her to enjoy herself. I meant it. She deserved joy. She deserved a man who adored her. The problem was, I knew he did, just not in the way he was supposed to. It had been raining again, a steady hush against the windows. I'd poured myself a glass of red wine and was curled up on the couch with an old movie playing quietly in the background. I wasn't watching it. My mind was elsewhere, as it always was now, replaying every glance, every word, every moment Jason and I had shared since that night at the front door. And then my phone buzzed. A message, unknown number, but I knew who it was before I opened it. I drove by. "Your lights are on." My heart stopped. I stared at the words for a long time, fingers frozen. I didn't respond. 5 minutes passed, maybe more. Then another message. "Can I come in?" Still, I didn't answer. But I got up, walked to the front door on autopilot, unlocked it, left it open a crack, then returned to the couch, heart pounding so loud I thought I might be sick. 2 minutes later, I heard the door open. He stepped inside silently, as if the moment itself was sacred and not to be broken by words. He looked wet, rain on his shoulders, his hair darkened at the roots. He was wearing a black coat, jeans, boots. He didn't speak, neither did I. He stood by the doorway for a beat, then slowly walked into the living room, his eyes never leaving mine. The tension in the air was unbearable, so thick it felt like sound had been swallowed. The rain outside, the flickering light from the television, the slow, aching silence. It was all part of a moment we both knew we had been heading toward. He sat down beside me, not touching, not yet. I don't know how long we sat like that. Minutes, maybe hours. My wine was untouched on the table. The movie continued to play, forgotten. The only sound was our breathing, slow and uneven. And then, finally, he spoke. "I didn't plan to stop," he said. "I was driving. I saw your house. I couldn't keep going." I swallowed. My mouth was dry. "I know I shouldn't be here," he added. "You shouldn't," I whispered. But I didn't tell him to leave. Instead, I turned toward him. He looked at me, not like someone hungry for sex, but like someone desperate to feel alive. Like the man who had held me in a blanket in the back of his truck when I cried about my parents, who used to write me poems on the backs of receipts. I reached for his hand. He met me halfway. We sat there, fingers laced, nothing else. And yet the intimacy of that contact was more overwhelming than any kiss could have been. His thumb brushed lightly against my palm, like he was memorizing the shape of me. I closed my eyes. "I think I've gone insane," I said softly. "You're not insane," he replied. "You're remembering." He was right. That's exactly what it felt like. Like I was remembering who I used to be. Before life buried me in obligations and expectations and motherhood and grief. Before Mark's illness. Before I learned how to be composed and sensible. With Jason, I had once been wild, brave, reckless. I missed her, the girl I used to be. And maybe in that moment, I wasn't just falling back into him. Maybe I was falling back into her. He leaned in slightly, not close enough to kiss, just enough for me to feel the shift in air, the pull of him. "If you don't want me here," he whispered, "tell me to leave." But I didn't. I couldn't. I turned my face toward his. He was the one who moved first. His lips brushed mine. Not a kiss, not quite. Just a breath, a question, an opening. And that was all it took. I kissed him. Softly, at first, like testing the edge of a wound. Then deeper, slower, hungrier. His hand slid to my neck, mine tangled in his coat, and for a moment, just a moment, there was no past, no future, no Lily, no wedding. There was only us. We didn't undress, we didn't cross every line, but we crossed enough. When he finally pulled away, his forehead resting against mine, we both knew we were past the point of return. "I'll go," he said, almost apologetically. I nodded, though I didn't want him to, and then he left, closing the door behind him with the same quiet as he'd arrived. I stood in the silence for a long time, the taste of him still on my lips, and for the first time in years, I felt terrified, because I knew that the line between memory and reality had been shattered, and nothing about what came next would ever be innocent again. The morning after I kissed him, I woke up before the sun. The house was still dark, hushed in that strange silence that follows a storm. And make no mistake, a storm had passed through me. Not the kind you can see in broken glass or overturned furniture, but the kind that guts you from the inside out. I sat on the edge of my bed, my hands gripping the edge of the mattress, breathing like someone who'd just outrun a fire. I didn't know who I was anymore. That kiss, brief, stolen, painfully restrained, had changed everything. It had taken a story I'd spent decades burying and unearthed it with brutal clarity. I wasn't just haunted by what had been. I was actively part of something dangerous. I wasn't a spectator. I wasn't a victim. I was the architect. And now I was lying. To my daughter, to myself, to the life I had so carefully curated over the years. That day, I tried to carry on as if nothing had happened. I went to the farmer's market. I answered emails. I picked up Lily's dry cleaning. But I could feel the lie clinging to my skin like a second layer. It itched. It pulsed. It throbbed beneath every smile I forced. Jason didn't call. He didn't text. And I didn't know if that was a mercy or a punishment. Every time my phone buzzed, my stomach flipped. Every time it didn't, the silence sliced deeper. I was trapped in a cycle of craving and guilt that made me feel 17 again, but not in the romantic way people imagine when they talk about young love. No, this was the darker side of youth, the obsession, the ache, the suffocating need for someone to reach out and say, "You're not alone in this." By the third day, I was unraveling, and then late in the afternoon, my doorbell rang. It wasn't him. It was Lily. She burst in carrying 3 paper bags full of wedding materials and bridal magazines, her cheeks flushed with excitement. She had no idea, not the faintest suspicion, that I was falling apart inside, that I'd let the man she loved hold me like I belonged to him. We sat at the dining table, sorting through escort cards and seating charts, her talking a mile a minute while I nodded along, smiling in all the right places. But I couldn't stop watching her hands, her fingers, her face. She had his eyes. I had never noticed it before, but now it was so obvious it nearly made me sick. Something in the shape of her brow, the curve of her mouth when she smiled, echoes of Jason in her features, the past looping back into the present with cruel symmetry. "I'm so happy," she said, pausing to rest her hand on mine. "He really sees me, you know, like really sees me. It's different with him. I don't feel like I'm pretending." I wanted to disappear. That night, after she left, I broke. I walked into the bathroom, shut the door, and let myself fall to the floor beside the tub. I sobbed silently, one hand clamped over my mouth, the other curled into a fist against the tile. I wasn't just crying for what I had done. I was crying because I wasn't sorry enough. Not really. Not in the way I should have been. I still wanted him, and I hated myself for it. The next time I saw Jason, it wasn't planned. I was at the florist's, picking up sample centerpiece arrangements. It was a coincidence, or maybe fate playing its cruel tricks again. He was there, leaning against the counter, speaking with the owner. I saw him before he saw me, and for a moment I considered walking out. pretending I hadn't seen anything, running. But I didn't. He turned, caught sight of me, and something shifted in his face. That same flicker I'd seen so many times now. Surprise, longing, something else buried deeper. We spoke briefly, neutral words, wedding logistics, colors, dates, all said too calmly, our tones too controlled. But beneath that calm, I felt the heat between us rising. I could tell he did too. When I turned to leave, he followed. Outside, the air was heavy with late spring humidity. The sky hung low, thick with unfallen rain. "I miss you," he said quietly. I didn't turn around. "I think about that night," he continued. "The way you kissed me. The way you didn't pull away." I closed my eyes. "I can't stop thinking about you." He stepped closer. I felt his breath against the back of my neck, and I wanted to crumble. But instead, I turned and looked him dead in the eyes. "This is wrong," I whispered. "You know that." "I know," he said, "and I still want it." I didn't reply. He didn't push. He walked away, slowly, disappearing around the corner, and I stood there alone, trembling. Something inside me broke open after that. I stopped pretending I could fix this. I stopped telling myself that I was strong enough to resist him. I knew now, with awful, terrifying certainty, that I was too far gone. The next time he came to the house, it wasn't about flowers, it wasn't about errands, it wasn't even about Lily. He showed up on a Wednesday evening, just after dusk. I opened the door, and we didn't speak. We didn't need to. He stepped inside, and I let him. And what happened next? I can't pretend it wasn't a choice. It was the most deliberate thing I'd done in years. There was no thunder when he walked in that night. No dramatic music. No flickering candlelight or whirlwind of clothes hitting the floor. Just quiet. Just two people standing in a hallway, surrounded by the normal sounds of a house in the early evening. The hum of the refrigerator, the tick of the clock in the dining room, the faint creak of the floorboards under our feet. But nothing about it was normal. I don't know how long we stood there, him just inside the door. Me with my hand still resting on the doorknob like some last futile tether to the life I was about to let go of. I didn't say a word. I didn't ask why he came or what he wanted. I already knew. We both did. We were past the point of needing excuses, and we were far beyond innocence. He stepped forward slowly, giving me every chance to stop him. I didn't. I couldn't. My body had already answered for me. I felt like I was being pulled underwater, every second heavier, deeper. And I didn't want to come up for air. I led him to the living room without a word. We sat on the couch, just like before, only now there was no pretending we were going to talk about flowers or schedules. There was no glass of wine in my hand, no half-watched movie in the background. Just silence, just breath. He looked at me with that same gaze, the one that had haunted me for decades, the one that said, "I remember you. I still see you. You're still mine." And I let myself look back. I reached out first, this time. My fingers touched his jaw, then his hair, curling slightly at the back, the way it always had. He leaned into my touch like it hurt to be without it. And when he kissed me, I felt 30 years fall away in the space between us. It wasn't rushed. It wasn't frantic. It was slow, careful, reverent. His hands moved along my arms, my shoulders, like he was rediscovering a map he used to know by heart but hadn't touched in years. My body responded before my mind could catch up, the way muscle remembers, the way skin wakes to something it thought it had forgotten. We didn't speak. There was nothing to say. His mouth found my neck, my collarbone, the place just beneath my ear, where he used to kiss me when we were teenagers, lying in the back of his old car. And suddenly, I was her again. I was 17. I was invincible. I was terrified. I was alive. We moved to the bedroom like we had done it 1,000 times before, and in a way, we had, if only in memory. The room was dim. No candles, no music, just us. The soft fall of clothes to the floor, the warmth of him beside me, the trembling of my own breath as his hands explored places that hadn't been touched in years. Not like this, not with care, not with memory, not with love, because that's what it felt like. Not just desire, love. Twisted, wrong, impossible, but still love. The way he looked at me, as if he were memorizing every inch. The way he whispered my name, not like a question, but like a vow. The way our bodies fit, not like strangers fumbling through lust, but like something long broken being fitted back together at last. When it was over, we lay in silence, breath slowing, hearts still racing. He didn't touch his phone. I didn't reach for mine. The outside world had stopped, and inside, I felt empty and full at the same time, like I had lost something and found something all at once. His arm was around me, my head on his chest. I could hear his heartbeat, and I hated that it comforted me. Because while the ache in my body was real, the release, the trembling aftermath of years of suppressed longing, the ache in my chest was sharper. Guilt, shame, fear. I was someone's mother. I was supposed to be safe, predictable, good. And instead, I had let a man who belonged to my daughter take me apart in the house where I raised her. He kissed my hair. I wanted to cry. I didn't. Instead, I closed my eyes and tried to memorize the moment. The way his breath felt against my forehead. The way his hand rested just above my hip. The weight of him beside me. Because deep down, I knew we wouldn't get many more of these. And no matter how much I wanted him, no matter how much my body still burned with the imprint of him, we had crossed into a space we couldn't stay in forever. Eventually, he sat up, began to dress without speaking. I wrapped myself in the sheet and watched him. He looked at me once as he buttoned his shirt, and that look held so much sadness it nearly undid me all over again. "I don't regret it," he said quietly. "Neither do I replied. But we both knew what we meant was, "I will." He left just after midnight. I didn't walk him to the door. I lay there, naked under the covers, staring at the ceiling and listening for the sound of his car pulling away. When it came, I exhaled. Long and shaky, I had done it. I had betrayed my daughter. And it had never felt so devastatingly right and ruinously wrong at the same time. I didn't hear from him for 4 days. Not a word, not a message, not even a call from Lily that mentioned his name in passing. It was as if he had vanished again. Just like all those years ago when I'd waited for him in the woods behind the high school and cried into my jacket sleeve as dusk swallowed the trees. But this time, I wasn't 17. This time, I was a grown woman who had made a conscious choice, and now I was living in the wreckage of it. Those 4 days were agony, not because I missed him, though I did, terribly, but because I didn't know what the silence meant. Had he changed his mind? Had he finally woken up and realized how sick all of this was? Had he told her? Did he feel disgusted with me or with himself? I cycled through a dozen possible stories, each worse than the last. He'd ended it. He was testing me. He was spiraling. He was telling her everything. I checked my phone obsessively. I avoided mirrors. I barely ate. I couldn't stop reliving that night, the feeling of his weight on me, the warmth of his breath, the sound he made when I said his name. I had memorized the rhythm of it, the way his hands moved, the way he looked at me in the silence after, as if I had broken something in him he didn't know could still be broken. And yet, when the silence stretched past day 2, then 3, my mind turned against me. Maybe I had misunderstood everything. Maybe I was the only one who felt that it had meant more than just sex. And still, I couldn't tell anyone. Not a soul. So I kept going. I kept pretending. I answered Lily's texts. I reviewed seating charts. I called the bakery to confirm the cake flavors. I even helped her pick out earrings that matched her dress. Through it all, I smiled, made jokes, offered opinions, all while carrying the heaviest secret of my life right behind my eyes. I didn't know who I was anymore. On the fifth day, I saw him again. It was a Friday evening. Lily had invited me to dinner at their apartment, a casual night of Thai takeout and finalizing honeymoon paperwork. I told her I was tired. I wasn't. I just didn't trust myself to be near him. Not after the silence. But she insisted. Please, Mom, just for a bit. We haven't seen you in forever. And so I went. Their apartment was bright and modern, full of the carefully curated touches of two people in the middle of building a life together. Framed photos, soft lighting, a linen tablecloth someone had clearly ironed for the occasion. When I stepped inside, Jason was already at the counter, opening a bottle of wine. He looked up when I walked in. His face didn't change, not at first, but his hands paused, just for a fraction of a second, as if surprised by their own movement. Hey, Diane, he said, as if nothing had ever happened. I swallowed. Hey. And just like that, we were strangers again. He hugged me politely. A brief touch, the kind that meant nothing. His lips brushed my cheek, impersonal, cold. And I felt something in me sink like a stone in deep water. We sat down to eat. Lily chatted happily, telling stories from work, talking about flight schedules and how she hoped the weather in Santorini would be just right. I nodded and responded, though I couldn't taste the food on my plate. I watched Jason from the corner of my eye, the way he reached for his glass, the way his shoulders tensed every time I spoke, the way his smile never quite reached his eyes. He didn't look at me, not once, until Lily got up to grab dessert. Then, and only then, did he meet my eyes, and I knew. It was still there, all of it. But something had shifted, not in the way he felt about me, but in the way he was handling it. He had put up a wall, and behind that wall, he was panicking. He didn't say anything. He didn't need to. His silence said everything. We were in danger. After dinner, as I helped Lily carry dishes to the sink, she turned to me and asked, "Are you okay? You've been quiet?" I smiled too quickly. Just tired. You sure? I nodded, of course. But her eyes lingered on me for a second longer than they should have. That was the first moment I felt it. Suspicion. It wasn't full-blown yet. It wasn't anything she would say aloud. But daughters know their mothers, the way we know the smell of their perfume or the tone of voice that means trouble. Something in me had changed, and she could sense it. She didn't know what, but the crack was there, and it would only grow wider. On the drive home, I gripped the steering wheel too tightly. My chest was tight. I kept glancing in the rearview mirror, as if guilt had a face and was following me. The house was dark when I returned. I poured myself a glass of water and stood in the kitchen, staring out at the garden. I had planted that garden with Lily when she was 6. Every rose bush, every patch of lavender, it had been our space, and now I could barely look at it without flinching. Because I had ruined everything. I had broken something sacred. And worse, I had done it willingly. Later that night, as I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, my phone buzzed. My breath caught. It was him. I'm sorry. 2 words, and yet they undid me completely, because it meant he was still there, still inside this with me, still tethered to the same madness I was drowning in. I stared at the screen for a long time. I didn't reply. Not right away. Instead, I let the ache sit with me, because I finally understood. We weren't just making a mistake. We were building a secret that couldn't survive, and sooner or later, someone was going to find it. I didn't answer his message, not because I didn't want to, but because I didn't know what to say anymore. I'm sorry. 2 words that held so much weight, and yet suddenly felt completely inadequate. What could either of us possibly be sorry for that would make any of this go away? The kiss? The night in my bed? The lifetime of silence we'd tried to compress into stolen glances and one desperate encounter. There was no apology big enough, and no future for whatever it was we tried to revive. But silence didn't undo what had already been done. It just made it worse. The next morning, I woke up early and opened every window in the house, as if fresh air could cleanse me. I stripped the sheets, laundered towels. I couldn't look at my bedroom without hearing his breath against my neck, without seeing his shirt on the floor. It made me nauseous, and yet part of me didn't want to forget it. I moved through the motions like I always did. Coffee, emails, a few phone calls to patients' families. But there was something different now. I felt like I was living in a house made of glass, and every step I took could be the one that shattered it. The tension found its way into everything. Into how I spoke, into how I moved, into how I blinked. And then came the moment when it finally cracked. It was a Tuesday. Lily came by unexpectedly. She had left work early after a client canceled and decided to stop in. I heard her car in the driveway and felt an immediate wave of panic. I hadn't planned for this. I wasn't prepared. The guest bathroom still smelled faintly of his cologne. Or maybe that was in my head. I opened the door, heart pounding, and did my best to look calm. She smiled, leaned in to hug me, and the moment her arms wrapped around me, I stiffened, just enough for her to notice. "You okay?" she asked, pulling back. I smiled. "Of course, just tired." She narrowed her eyes slightly, but didn't press. We sat in the kitchen drinking tea. She talked about the rehearsal dinner, about the playlist, about whether she should wear her hair up or down. I nodded and gave answers where I could, but I kept wiping my palms on my jeans under the table. She paused mid-sentence and looked at me. "Mom," she said, "can I ask you something?" My stomach dropped. "Sure." She tilted her head, suddenly cautious. "Is everything okay between you and Jason?" I blinked. "What do you mean?" "I don't know. You've just seemed weird around him, and he's been kind of distant lately. Cold, even with me. I thought maybe you two had a weird history or something." A weird history. That almost made me laugh. Or cry. I wasn't sure which, but I forced a chuckle. "No, sweetheart. We're fine. Probably just the wedding stress." She watched me too long, and I realized how good she was at reading people. How much she had learned to observe. From me. And then her expression changed, almost imperceptibly, but it did. Not suspicion, not yet, but something else. Curiosity. That was worse. I diverted the conversation. I asked about the dress again, about the photographer. I stood and refilled our mugs and kept my hands busy. And when she finally left an hour later, hugging me again at the door, I thought I might collapse the second her car was out of sight. I didn't sleep that night. Jason didn't message again, but I could feel him still, in the gaps between thoughts, in the heat that spread across my chest every time my phone buzzed. I started imagining things. That Lily had found something, that she'd looked through his texts, that she'd seen the way he stared at me across the table. The next day, it got worse. I was in a boutique downtown, picking up a necklace Lily had selected for the ceremony. It was delicate, gold, with a small diamond in the center. I held the box in my hands and tried to imagine her wearing it. And then I heard a voice behind me. "Diane." I turned. It was him, Jason, standing 3 feet away, pale, eyes bloodshot, looking like he hadn't slept in days. "I didn't think I'd see you here," he said quietly. "I didn't think I'd see you at all," I replied, my voice barely above a whisper. He exhaled, rubbing his hand over his face. "We need to talk, not here." "I know, but soon, please." I nodded once, and he left the store without buying anything. I stayed frozen for a minute, fingers trembling around the jewelry box. The saleswoman asked if I was okay. I told her I was just dizzy from skipping breakfast. That night, he came to the house again. I didn't invite him. He didn't knock. He waited in his car outside until I finally opened the door and stepped onto the porch. He looked up at me with a face I barely recognized. Guilt, grief, panic. He looked like a man drowning. "I think she knows," he said. My breath caught. "She hasn't said anything," he added, "but she's watching me, asking questions about my past, about you." I didn't answer. My throat had closed. "I can't lie to her anymore," he said, voice raw. "But I don't know how to tell her the truth either." "There is no truth," I whispered. "Not one we can say out loud." He shook his head, pacing now, running both hands through his hair. "I thought I could handle this," he said. "I thought we could steal this time and keep it locked away somewhere, but we can't." I sat down on the porch step, suddenly too tired to stand. "I love her," he said. I flinched. "But I never stopped loving you." My vision blurred. "We destroyed something," I said, voice flat. "We knew exactly what we were doing, and we did it anyway." He sat beside me. We didn't touch. We didn't look at each other. We just sat in the dark, both of us breathing like we were underwater. The porch light flickered. A car passed in the distance. And in the stillness between words, I understood the worst part of it all. It was already too late to undo, but far too early to survive what was coming. There's a moment in every disaster where the silence changes, where the tension breaks, not with an explosion, but with a stillness so unnatural it forces you to listen. That kind of silence fell over my life the morning Lily called and said she was coming over just to talk. Her voice was too light, too careful. I sat on the edge of my bed, holding the phone, staring into the space where Jason had stood just nights ago. He had left through the back door, barefoot, like a ghost. He didn't say goodbye. After that last conversation on the porch, I hadn't seen him again. We had agreed, or rather, fallen into agreement, that there was no path forward, that the danger had eclipsed whatever sweetness or longing had once sustained us. I could still hear his voice, broken in the dark, saying he loved her and me at the same time, and neither feeling was enough to save any of us. I showered, dressed, put on lipstick I hadn't worn in months. Not for him, not for her, for me, because I needed to feel like a woman who could survive what was coming. Lily arrived just before noon. She walked into the kitchen like she owned it, her childhood home, her mother's sanctuary, and sat down at the table with a folder in her hand. I made tea because I needed something to do with my hands. I didn't ask what was in the folder. She waited until I sat across from her before she spoke. And when she did, her voice was steady. "I went through Jason's phone," she said. I didn't flinch. I couldn't. My body had gone numb. I didn't mean to. I was looking for the name of a vendor. But then I saw a message. She didn't open the folder. Not yet. She didn't have to. It wasn't graphic. Just words. Your name. A sentence. She paused. "I shouldn't have come over. I miss you. Please don't hate me." My throat closed. I told myself it was nothing, that maybe he meant someone else, that maybe I was misreading it. But then I looked further. She opened the folder. Inside were printouts, text messages, call logs, photographs of the driveway security cam she had installed a few months ago and forgot to tell me about. I checked the timestamps. The night I was out with my friends. The night I texted you from the bar. He was here, wasn't he? I couldn't lie. I didn't want to. I looked her in the eyes, and for the first time in my life, I felt like the child in the room. "Yes," I said. Her lips parted, but no sound came out. She leaned back in the chair, eyes glassy, but not crying. I think she had done that already. I think the tears were long past. "How long?" she asked. "Not long," I said. "Before or after I introduced you?" I hesitated. Before. That was the deepest cut. She stood up and walked to the window, arms crossed tightly over her chest. Her spine was stiff, her breath shallow. "I don't know what I expected," she said. "I think I wanted you to lie, to deny it. I think I needed you to protect me." "I didn't know it was him," I said, standing slowly. "Not until he walked through the door. Not until it was too late." She turned. Her face wasn't angry. It was worse than that. It was hollow. "You had a choice," she said. "I made the wrong one. More than once." "Yes." She let out a sharp breath that sounded more like a laugh. "I used to tell people how close we were. How you were my best friend. You were the one person in the world I could always trust. I never wanted to hurt you. But you did." We stood there in the kitchen, the room where I taught her how to bake, where we danced on Sunday mornings, where I held her through breakups and bad grades and heartbreak. Now it felt like a courtroom. "I hate you right now," she whispered. "I know. I don't know if that'll change." I nodded, tears finally rising. "You don't have to forgive me," I said. "You may never want to, but you deserve the truth, all of it." And so I told her everything. From the beginning, from 17, from the letters that never came, from the night he came back into my life. I told her about the kiss, about the silence, about the night he stayed. I told her the things I had kept buried so deep, I didn't even realize they were still alive inside me. She didn't interrupt. She didn't sit down again. She just listened. And when I finished, she walked toward the door. "Are you leaving?" I asked. "I don't know," she said. "I just can't be here." She opened the door, and then she turned back. "I loved him," she said. "I know." And she was gone. The house was too quiet after that. Days passed. Jason never came back. I heard from a friend that the wedding was postponed. Not canceled, just paused. Lily wasn't taking calls. Her phone went straight to voicemail. Her apartment was still in her name, but she wasn't staying there. I had no way of knowing where she went. I didn't try to find her. I knew she would come back when she was ready, or maybe not at all. That was the risk I had taken. That was the cost of what I did. And I didn't deserve her grace. Not yet. Maybe not ever. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I'd told him to leave that first night. If I'd closed the door. If I'd protected her instead of chasing something that had died decades ago. But then I remember the way it felt when he touched me. Not because of the desire, but because it made me feel like I existed again. Like I wasn't just someone's mother, someone's wife, someone's dependable friend. For one brief, dangerous, foolish moment, I had been a woman who was wanted, who remembered how to want. And that truth, as shameful as it is, will always live in me. Jason left town 3 weeks later. I don't know where he went. I didn't ask. He left no note, no explanation. He just disappeared again, like he had the first time. And maybe that was for the best. Maybe he was always meant to be the chapter I never finished, the wound that never quite closed. It's been almost 6 months now. The garden has bloomed again. I've painted the kitchen. I've taken down the wedding calendar that hung by the fridge. I haven't heard from Lily since that day, but I write her emails I never send. I keep them in a draft folder labeled "When She's Ready." Some days I tell myself I did what I did out of loneliness. Other days I admit the truth. I did it because I still loved him. And that love, reckless, selfish, broken, wasn't enough to save anything. It only proved how easy it is to lose everything you once held sacred.